Well, good evening at 7 o'clock, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Pullman City Council meeting for November 15th as we get some arrangements for chairs and some other things that we're working on right now. But nice to have you here, and especially nice to have our state representatives here as well. That'll be the first part of the council meeting, then we'll have our regular council meeting as well. So with that, Dee, would you please take roll?
Mayor Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Benjamin. Councilmember Dubin.
Here.
Councilmember Guido.
Here.
Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Here.
Councilmember Wright.
Francis Benjamin notified us that he could not be here tonight. Do I hear a motion to excuse?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we have some announcements tonight. Obviously, the first one that we're going to make is one of a very serious nature and one that's really tugged on the hearts of every one of us, knowing what's been going on over in Moscow. Senseless and violence that left 4 University of Idaho students dead on Sunday. Not only troubling, but sad as well, and especially with some of the information's coming out that apparently they were victims of stabbings, what we're hearing today in the news, and also Moscow police say that as far as identifying a suspect, they have not come out with that publicly, but they say that people should not be concerned in terms of in their homes or things of that nature, but they haven't provided those kind of details. But we certainly mourn for the families of those 4 young people, Ethan, Madison, Xenia, Kaylee. We pledge support. We've offered support. I know our police department has contacted the Moscow Police Department to see if they have any help, if they need any help. I think we're going to have a trauma team go over there and help with the officers. I know the FBI is now working with them as well. And we certainly reach out and give our sympathy to the Vandal family, the Moscow first responders, Moscow community at large, and especially to the families that are going through this right now. Food for the Pullman is running its 2nd annual Thanksgiving meal giveaway and food drive on November 23rd between 1 and 5 at the Pullman Senior Center located on the 1st floor of the Pullman Recreation Building. If you're in need, you can come by, pick up with no questions asked Thanksgiving meal kit. All food drive donations during the event will receive free pizza, and donations will go to the WSU Cougar Food Pantry to help students in need in our community. You can find out more details on thefoodforpullman.com. Residential leaf pickup continues this week on Military Hill, November 16th, 17th, and 18th. We'll also ask you to make sure you check your storm drains out there for leaves. This is one year that Mother Nature didn't quite cooperate with our leaf pickup schedule, because our leaves are still coming down and the leaf pickup has already gone by my house, so they're still working on that. If you're looking for a change in scenery, don't forget to check out City of Pullman Career Portal on our website. For your next opportunity, employees enjoy excellent benefits, advancement opportunities, supportive, team-oriented atmosphere here as well. Tomorrow night at 7, the Planning Commission will be holding a special meeting right here in the council chambers. 2 public hearings are on the agenda, one regarding drive-throughs in Central Business District, the other centers around planned unit development. You can check more on our website. Parks Department expects new playground equipment for Sunnyside Park to arrive in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Weather permitting, crews will be getting work on those installations. Knox Concrete is laying concrete foundation for Krugel Park in the spot where the old picnic shelter is, and that should be taking place as well. And the Pullman Police Department is now accepting applications from those interested in joining the next Citizens Academy. The 11-week program is set to begin in February. Enrollment is limited. Interested individuals can learn more and apply on the website. And I know there's a number on the council who have been through, including myself, and I know Nathan's been through it, and several others have been through the Citizens Academy. And it's really well worth your effort to go through that. You learn so much, and especially going through just finding out some of the things that our police department needs to do, and just to make sure they can just comply with all the laws and things that might be passed by the legislature. Yeah, so I just thought I'd mention those kind of things. Well, tonight, speaking of the legislature, we have with us Mark Sessler, our state senator, Mary Dye, Joe Schmick, state representatives, and just nice to have you with us. We appreciate you being here. Thank you for making the effort to be here. And I think the usual custom is we'll start with Mark, and then you'll give your reports, and then we'll start asking questions. And I know you have it before us. our legislative priorities. So with that, Mark Sessler. And we'll just turn that on for you. There we go.
Well, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Good to be back this annual meeting with the city. I think as we approach the coming session, we look at it and we say, well, it's pretty much a status quo election overall when the dust settles between the House and the Senate. The revenue forecasts have remained to be pretty good. Anybody that says there's a budget crisis, that's just not so. Cuts at this point become Olympia cuts, not Pullman cuts. So we're in pretty good shape going into that. My only role I know for sure that I'm going to absolutely positively do will be to continue on Ways and Means, where I expect to be the ranking Republican on capital budget. The good news about capital budget, the ranking member actually does negotiate, because unless numbers get really lopsided between the two parties, capital budget's always bipartisan because of the 60% requirement for bond votes. My colleague across the aisle, Senator Millett, and I worked really well together last year, and I've been really impressed. He's been at WSU, he's been in Ritzville, he's been Yakima Valley, you name it. He's really done a good job of getting out and touring facilities. For example, Eastern State Hospital. We don't want it to become a problem like Western State. He's been there. So I have some optimism about that. I may stay on the committees I'm on. I may move. We'll just see how the legislature organizes. Transportation, for the first time, I think in anybody's memory, a transportation package was totally partisan. Absolutely, totally, because there was no bonds. The last major transportation package had a 2/3 vote in the Senate. That didn't happen this past time. But there is a window of opportunity in transportation in that the money has essentially doubled from the cap and tax proposal, and none of that is bonded. But to do the really big mega projects, bonding is a necessity if you're going to get anything done. So I would hope that it's a little more bipartisan and statewide. You really can't represent 8 districts or 8 counties without a single project. That really doesn't work, and that's not the way Pat Patterson or Gene Prince would have done it. It's not the way I did it when I was majority leader, so we're optimistic that we get there on that. I think the Pullman priorities on crime really fit ours very closely, because when you talk to the chiefs, the sheriffs, the working officers, it was nonsense. The Blake decision isn't good for people with problems. Lack of pursuit is not good for law enforcement to apprehend people. Certainly needs to be real changes to both. And I think we all go to Olympia always with some optimism, or you shouldn't go. I've been there in deep minorities, majorities, ties. If you ever get pessimistic, you shouldn't go. So we'll keep that optimism at this point. I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I've probably rambled on more than enough.
If you want to.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, and members of the council, members of the community. It's great to be back in Pullman, and luckily the weather did cooperate, and we were able to make it safely to Pullman from Pomeroy, the fog capital of the state, I think. But anyway, really grateful to see what we have to work with. Initially, there was some concern about how things were going to play out, but as the week has progressed, I am gaining a lot more optimism as to what we can and can't do with our colleagues. I'm looking forward to serving again as ranking on House Energy and Environment, and serve also on appropriations and capital budget this year, but we'll see what happens in the session coming up. In terms of why I feel optimistic for what we can do. I have kind of a two-track idea in mind for environment policy. As you know, our committee was the one that we were tasked with trying to either make cap and trade better or stall it at some level. It is there. The revenues expected are going to be quite high, and now its weaknesses in the statutory language as to how the money is to be spent and distributed and how it is to be accounted for and held accountable for are real. And so it gives us an opportunity to speak into that and do some real significant things for cities in terms of water quality, stormwater and wastewater treatment, in terms of greening up our cities with tree planting, improving the water quality in the Puget Sound, particularly for salmon health. I think that that will assist all of us statewide if we can restore that marine estuary, one of the largest in the nation and equally troubled as many of the other marine estuaries. And so there's so many things that I'm excited about putting forward on the table to assist in those endeavors. And I think that we can build a lot of support in the city and hopefully build new partnerships that will strengthen the collaboration between the House Democrats and the House Republican caucus. In terms of Pullman, I know you go, well, what does that have to do? What is the nexus between improving water quality for salmon runs in Puget Sound? And the nexus is the Salish Sea, the Pacific Shelf, and the mouth of the Columbia, where those salmon roam. And it's important to all of us, if we want to work with a salmon population that is threatened, that we work with the biggest problems first, right? It's like the Pareto, and so the 20% of a thing will cause 80% of the problems. And so if you take the top 5 wastewater treatment plants in the Puget Sound and remove the nutrients from their wastewater and cool the stormwater runoff, you can technically save a lot of salmon. And it will just definitely get closer to our goal of having a clean water supply in Puget Sound. And that will help us in terms of our salmon returns as well. So I just have a great deal of optimism on these policies being bipartisan this year. I think people are more open to hearing some fresh ideas, and that's what I'm going on in terms of the budget and the money. That because those funding pools haven't been defined, we're going to be there making sure that they don't forget the 9th District. And right now, we're asking those questions. How do you imagine our communities play in the overall communities that are going to be targeted for funding for the Climate Commitment Act dollars, and making sure that we get those definitions right and fighting for those, the fairness of the matter, because we all are contributing to the climate change agenda that has been put forward, whether you wanted to or not. There will be increases in cost in our fuel supply, especially for agriculture. That's a deep, troubling thing. It will impact this economy locally. And those things are real, and we should make sure that we should mitigate or depend on those impacts being lessened to the most that we can. So those are kind of the way my fight looks like this year. I'm really looking forward to working on it. For Pullman, some of the plans that we have for planting trees, greening areas, building on trails and recreational opportunities fit well into your city's agenda, and I really welcome the opportunity to work with you on those things. And thank you for having us tonight. It's great to be here.
Well, good evening, everyone. Mayor Johnson, members of the council, thank you for having us. Always look forward to coming in and visiting. I will make the assumption that I will still be involved with healthcare since I have been the ranking member there. And there's a couple things around healthcare I'd like to talk about. One of them is the 988, or the hotline for suicide prevention. It's a very urbanistic approach where the rurals, what we're going to call this area, the rural areas are going to struggle. Some of the very basic things, when a call comes in to the dispatcher, I think there needs to be some additional training for that dispatcher to be able to help them. That's one. Secondly, most likely the first responder out to that is either going to be a deputy sheriff or a first responder. And I think they need some basic training about how to handle, how to help that. And so we've got some work to do there to make sure that we can provide the safety that this program is intended, and also to help the people that are struggling and finding themselves in crisis. Another, something I've been thinking a lot about, and we are short in a lot of professions, whether it's mental health providers, substance use counselors, nurses, doctors, ARNPs. And oftentimes, Olympia deals with this with a fire hose approach. Whoever has the best lobbyist seems that that's where some money goes. But when all these areas we are so short, I think we need to take a step back, and maybe there's a better way to help these folks, and then ask for a commitment for some time spent in Washington. I mean, if we're going to help pay for the training of these, I think you can ask for a certain amount of time practicing in the communities in the state of Washington. Because we are so short of mental health providers, substance use providers, we need them now. And we need to have a way and a pathway forward to encourage these folks to be in these fields, challenging and rewarding as they may be. I just think we need to take a step back and a little bit holistic approach how we're going to do this for the future, because there's so many areas that this affects, whether it be your local hospital or doctor's office or folks needing counseling in the city. Oh, one more thing about the 988. There is a requirement in that bill that if you call that line, there is a 24-hour, you see a provider within 24 hours. Well, I can tell you right now, probably not going to happen because we don't have enough. And so all these things kind of move together. And we're going to have to continue to keep working at this. And I think that those are pretty pertinent issues. I think there's more realization that agriculture and those involved in agriculture have one of the highest suicide rates in the nation. And we have to, I believe that we need to continue to fight that stigma that it's okay to ask for help and encourage people to do so. I mean, I farmed for 35 years, and a lot of times the last thing you ever want to do is ask for help. We've got to get past that. We don't want to see tragedies happen to families and members of our community. So we've got to get past that stigma. If you need some help, it's okay to ask. And we need to be there to help them make sure that those services are available. And I think with that, Mayor, I'll stop, because I could ramble a long time, but I would much rather to hear.
You have so many things on your plate right now in terms of long-term care too, because they've.
Oh, I'm going to have a replacement bill for that.
Oh, you are? Okay. Why don't you just talk a little bit about that, because that's on.
We're still going through a lot of that, but I want to make sure that people they have the ability to direct their own care. And if you look at the current program that's out there, look at the inflation. I mean, you just basically lost 10% of your purchasing power of that one-time benefit. It's not going to work. So there's a better way, and I'm working on that too.
And since you mentioned about one of the things that we've heard from our healthcare providers here, and especially mental health providers, is if we could have some kind of a reciprocity agreement with other states, that we can accept their degrees, their certifications from Idaho or from Montana, and we could have them working right away, but I hear it's a Department of Health issue.
Well, there's going to be a proposal for a counselor or mental health professional compact, and we're going to be the first one really in the Western United States if we would approve that. Started back east, and it's moving this way. Depending on the profession, there is pushback. The nurses one, that is a tricky one. But there's going to be other compacts so that people, to make it easier to practice when they're properly trained in other states, to be able to practice here. So we're going to continue to go down that road and keep fighting to make sure that it's not the silver bullet. However, it is a tool, and it's one we need to help with our provider shortage that we find ourselves in.
So this is largely a conversation with the state legislator and our councils. So I'm going to make sure that a council member would like to make comment off of our priorities or something else. And Nathan, you were just itching to get going here. I could just sense that. So.
I've been trying to be a little bit less that way, but no, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and all of you for coming. I know a discussion we had previously was, you know, one of the things coming over here, and this has been my concern also, is the timing, the snow, making sure that all of you are able to travel safely here and there. You know, I know that's important. But as far as, I did get really excited hearing what you were talking about. And Representative Schmidt, I tell you what, 988, I was just talking about that. I was talking to Annie Pillars also. It was yesterday. And I know Ann Parks is on a thread with myself as well. And they're starting to do, you know, what's so great about our smaller areas is we kind of seem to come up with new inventive ways to fill those gaps in that training and to try and find out how do we deal with this, because there's a challenge, people sitting through, you know, a whole day of training. You know, I've gone through the mental health first aid training. I think the mayor has, there's been a couple other people who have, and we really want to be able to do that here at the city, but having a whole day related to that is just, it's really difficult for people to sit through and to take work away. However, right now what we're looking at is there is a 1.5 hour type of training that identifies some of the some of the situations that are closest to suicide. And how do you identify that? And you may not need a whole training on identifying, you know, LSD, all of these other things, but the major portion of suicide that you discussed, that's extremely important. And that's what we're working with.
Who's providing, who gave the training?
So we're actually going to be doing that, and you know the person from WSU, correct, Ann? Is that Schwatsky? I have it in my, yeah, so Annie Pillars, and then WSU
Kathy
has.
Stillwell.
Sorry?
Kathy Stillwell,
Stillwell.
yes.
And you might mention Annie Pillars is our county coroner, and I also serve with her on the
Yes.
Community Action Center as well.
She's
So
awesome.
She
Yes.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
And hospice.
So, you know, that's really, that's what we're trying to do here locally. And so that's pretty exciting. Of course, Annie Pillars has been doing such a great job with the Suicide Intervention Committee that I sit on as well. And that's here. That's working with, you know, representative from McGregor. It's working with representatives from WSU, just all different areas. The other thing I just will mention real quick, and it's regarding, and this is something regarding to livability, and this is not necessarily my forte, but when I went to the Veterans Symposium up at WSU, I had an Air Force officer come up to me. I can't share his name because he didn't give me permission to do it, but I said I would pass it along. He said there's a lot of challenges right now with veterans coming out and being able to find housing that is within that national, you know, allotment for housing. And he said this is something he's experienced coming into Pullman, having a family of his own, 2 kids, so on, and teaching at WSU. He's not making enough to be able to afford housing within within Pullman. And apparently this is something that's shared by many, many veterans out there. It's just not keeping up with inflation. It's not keeping up with housing prices. And we do such a disservice to our military families. And more now are serving in a professional, such an amazing professional capacity right here in the community, in the region, in our state. And so I don't know how much can be done, but I did say I would bring it up because the three of you are coming, and I know you're champions for this. So that's, yeah.
I know in our Community Action Center, Riverview Apartments, we actually had spaces allocated for veterans, but they went rather quickly. I think they had like 5 or 6 spaces out of some 60 different apartments, and they have different categories for each one. We're trying to fill those allotments, and yes, it's really challenging. You definitely hear it from the veterans around here.
And what he was saying is he really wants to start a home, not necessarily be in a temporary, but begin his home here in the community. And it's that middle housing
Oh, yeah.
that we've talked about before. You know, you have the student housing and then the expensive housing. So,
And
as I
speaking of
mentioned-
housing, that's been one of Megan's issues, and
Thank you,
and
Mr.
I know
Mayor.
that I heard some really excellent comments, actually from Annie Pillars just recently in last CAC meeting, that we might be working towards a housing authority for Whitman County. It looks like there's some potential. So,
Yeah.
Megan?
Well, thank you. And thank you, representatives, for coming tonight. And I'm glad that Nathan brought up the whole idea of middle housing because, as you see, it is one of our priorities legislatively. I'd love to hear about your thoughts on that. But before you do that, I do want to let you know that that is an issue that I've identified being new on the council. And obviously, you're hearing about it statewide all the time. But I want people to know that it's also an issue here in Pullman. And increasingly, people are finding that they cannot get into a home. Just heard on the radio today that graduate students and TAs are beginning to unionize because they cannot afford basic living expenses. And so there's increasingly these demands for more of this middle housing, and we have put together a housing solutions committee, and one of the things we are looking at long-term is creation of a housing authority, but more at a regional level. Obviously working with Community Action Center here, but interested in knowing what your thoughts are in terms of the 9th Legislative District and housing issues.
Well, I think that you're going to have I believe, the proper incentives out there so that it's worthwhile to build. I think we need to remove the barriers because there are barriers for people who do want to come in sometimes and build. There's a lot of things I think that are available and we can do. I also would like to see rural Washington be able to participate to a greater extent to the money that's out there for low-income housing. Because sometimes it, again, tends to be a bit more urbanistic, and we have housing needs too. Also, and I know there's been times when the county has been successful in getting some help to build, and I think that we need to pursue that further. So we need to kind of both prongs. We need to look at it, what are the holdups from the private sector that's keeping us from doing that? And secondly, for those monies that are out there and appropriated, we need to make sure that some of that money comes our way also.
Well, I think in many cases in housing, government is the problem. If we look just this week, past week, at the natural gas ban, it doesn't work everywhere for everybody. If we look at the Growth Management Act, what it's done, one of the really positive things I got to see at the far corner of our district was Habitat for Humanity working with the Tri-City Skill Center. They're building a house there for $191,000 in Pasco. They're 3-bedroom garage. They wouldn't put a garage on but the code for the city says you must have a garage. So they're putting it in a price range that's more affordable than a lot of well-used middle housing. And one of the things we did different last year capital budget, we didn't say Habitat for Humanity, but read between the lines, that they were considered a provider for housing because their cost was so much lower. We had an example. Nathan, you brought up veterans housing. In Mason County, the state was paying more for tiny homes for veterans than what Habitat for Humanity was building new ones. So we can throw some money at it, or we can look at outside the box a little bit. And the growth management is not the 10 Commandments. It could be amended. And where are the non-governmental solutions or the equivalent of a skill center in this area? I mean, we've got a very active bank. Lewiston Clarkston is involved in Habitat for Humanity. And it's about supply because economics tell you too little supply, too high a price. We have not appreciably increased the supply at the rate we need for housing. So I've seen some good things outside the box, and I'm sure Habitat for Humanity in Pasco or Lewiston Clarkson would be more than happy to see how they could expand in Pullman.
We have a very active Habitat for Humanity for the Palouse, based in
Mm-hmm.
Moscow. They've got the store there, and they've built homes, trying to find, we've built a couple of homes right now out in some rural areas. They're trying to get some property here in Pullman to see if they can do some work. Again, they live a lot on volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
and they have the Codger Group that does a lot of their work, and that certainly helps them keep the price down. But we do have a very active
Well,
group here.
they're one of the reasons why we put capital budget housing money there was because we could get a better value. And I think they're going to be looked at favorably again because you just look at the price difference. Tiny home for a veteran, more money than a Habitat for Humanity home. That's, where do we help?
Other councilmen, okay, Ann.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Representatives and Senator, for being here tonight. Representative Schmick, I really appreciate your commitment to mental health and particularly suicide awareness. I have experience with this with a family member, and I can tell you that recently I had an incident, or they had an incident, and it involved the city of Kirkland law enforcement, city of Pullman law enforcement, and they were phenomenal in how they handled this. But I do agree that more resources are needed just for, and with our being a university town, and I think it's really important for our young people especially, but all of our professionals, all of our residents to have access to 988 and to be able to know that there's help and there's no stigma. So I really appreciate your attention toward that. Representative Dye, you know that we have the repurposing of the railways as one of our large goals, and that is a huge goal of ours because it really would enable us to repurpose some and redesign some recreational space in our town, to expand our trail systems in town. And these are just spaces that are lying dormant right now and that we don't have access to, and is actually inhibiting our ability to provide more trails to our residents. And we held 3 town hall meetings in October, and every single one of them, there were so many residents talking about the importance of trails to our quality of life, and they're on YouTube, so you can visit that and see that. But we would just really appreciate it if you all could somehow put some attention toward that, because it's just dormant space that could really be used to help revitalize our community. And Senator Schessler, I really appreciate your comments about a skill center. I grew up in an area where that was a really big part of a regional school district. My brother personally just gained so much from that. He was a student that would have fallen through the cracks had it not been for a skill center. And I think vocational training is just so important now. And anything that we could do to try to bring that sort of resource to this district would be really, really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And again, for the rail effort here, we're talking about inside our city limits. We're not talking elsewhere. And we know that we've talked to you before, and we've had some support for that. So we definitely want to get moving on that. If there's any way we can work our way through that so we can get those trails and get some, we've got some interesting designs that's come from the public. We've seen some designs here that we can do and just clean up a lot of the area, and especially since we're doing all this work right now and revitalizing our downtown. It would just be nice to have everything go together at the same time. So again, we appreciate your efforts on that. Mary?
Thanks. So just listening to the initial plans for the parts of the Climate Commitment Act that has funding for recreation and for communities of the disparate health impacts in communities that have those issues that have yet to be identified. I think that they're still really wrestling with the language of the statute, but recognize that they need to focus on outdoor recreation and building healthy opportunities for people. And so it lines up with the work that we started last year in the Republican caucus for the environment, and that was to focus on outdoor recreation and climate adaptation, since, you know, a lot of the CO2 is already baked into the recipe, and so we need to adapt to the new normal and do some really positive things for our communities to build resiliency and build healthy communities. And so I'm really open to talking about what you envision and be creative. I've been recently working on some interesting work that was done in Oregon, where they did offsets with their utilities and worked on their watersheds and improved park space in their river watersheds in Oregon. And I think that there's some ideas there that we're hatching to do that. But I just believe that there's so much more that we can do with our urban space to connect the ecology with the humans that live there and make a social cultural change at the same time.
Eileen?
Yeah, and following directly on that, thank you for being here, is our downtown is my big focus and has been for some while now. And one of the things that we need to do is get the heavy truck traffic off of our town and make that more walkable, more livable, more breathable, and controlling our stormwater issues and all like such. And what I have been following is the freight study, the state freight study, and Pullman has suggested, and Whitman County has suggested, two alternatives to what we had been traditionally talking about, north bypass, south bypass. We've set that aside. We've gotten very realistic about that. But there's a couple other things that are on that for the freight study, and one of them is Kirkendall Road. And Pat and I drove it one day, and at least I was very enthusiastic about the possibilities for Kirkendall Road. The $5 million that we have in our document here would go a long ways towards making that happen. It's very doable. And some modifications, obviously, and changes to that road, but that space is available. It's relatively flat. That would really take that truck traffic off of our community. And that would be my key thing. I will be knocking on your doors when we get over there in February and trying to find out what's going on with that freight study and how the county, Whitman County, has been hot on that Kirkendall Road route also. They feel that that's absolutely the way to go. And so that's, like I say, I'm really focused on that, because that truck traffic piece for our downtown is absolutely vital to our progress and the additional monies we're going to be spending there.
Well, it excites me what you've done so far with your downtown, and I'm seeing downtowns in our region that are doing amazing things. Like, I love the new downtown in Walla Walla, really fun. And so I went to Sweden this year and had the opportunity to spend some time in Stockholm, and they have huge corridors that are just walkable, and the shopping, they're like outdoor malls. And if they can do it up there in Sweden, where it's really cold most of the time and dark, lovely in the summer for the 2 minutes that it's summer. But anyway, yeah, I just think that there's so many ideas that can be incorporated in getting the freight out of there. They'll probably be very grateful not to be trying to navigate these there's a lot of people in traffic, it's difficult, and so I'm really glad that you're thinking of possibilities and new solutions. Love to partner with you, just bring pictures. I do better with pictures.
Okay.
Thank you.
Becky?
Thank you, and thank you all for being here again. I know some of you have some trips to go back home, and there's really only one reason for you to be here tonight, and that's commitment, and I acknowledge you for that. Thank you so much for coming. One of my biggest concerns are the students in our town. Parents all over the state send them to us, and we have them for the few years that we do, and they become citizens. They're under a tremendous amount of stress. I'm really glad to hear about the mental health initiatives. These students, I've seen them suffer. I've been here 26 years. I've seen them suffer every year. The fall semester, when there isn't a break until Thanksgiving, is always a tough one. I've not seen it like this semester, the number of students who are suffering. The training that Nathan mentioned, I think is already on WSU. I've taken a similar training anyway, and I know a lot of people at WSU do, because we're so concerned about these students. What are the signs that we should be looking for? Some of the stress they're under is financial. As you know, in 2007 and 2008, some of the state funding for tuition was pulled back, even though the WSU offers public higher education, and that's a public good. And so some of it is tremendously financial, to the point that a lot of students qualify for food stamps, and we even have a food center on campus in the Cub, in the Student Union building, for students to access that. So I'm deeply concerned about the students and how we might support them with funding, because housing and all these other issues, they're all issues, but part of the problem is, you know, the amount of money both that students are earning and the amount that they're paying in tuition. Another point I'd like to ask about is Highway 26. You know, Highway 26, I think for anyone, right, is just a long haul. I was so excited to see the passing lane put in. For our students, many of whom are under 25, it can be even more of a challenge because of where they are developmentally. We know that the frontal lobe that regulates long-term decision-making consequences doesn't finish developing until 25, and we've got these kids coming from all over the state to us. I know sometimes when I'm on Highway 26 behind something that's very slow, trying to figure out if I should pass or not, relying on my patience, and I'm 55, is not particularly easy. For someone who's 18, that can be even more challenging. So I know that highway, I'm hoping what you're going to tell me is more passing lanes are coming, it's going to be complete, but it's really, really important for these students, and I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I'll lead off on Highway 26 because that was part of connecting Washington. Two of the lanes when I came over last time are virtually done. The third lane was delayed because we had unusually wet conditions this spring. It's in the queue. I'll remain optimistic. The budget language from 2015, I always felt called for 4 passing lanes or climbing lanes in the area. DOT isn't sure how it reads, but surprisingly, they did put it on the ask list for the eastern region. I think that's, when you look at the cost of a project in Whitman County compared to King County, it's a rounding error. So I'd like to see that is completed on my watch, that we get that third lane completed and the fourth lane in the queue, because the total cost is simply a rounding error. So we'll hope for that. I think it continues to be my priority and a chamber and city priority, WSU priority. We talked to people about the lanes on 195. It's been a game changer for people that go back and forth to Spokane for healthcare, business, or just coming down here for a game. It's a game changer. And I think this has that potential to be for the people that live there, as well as the students and the families that come over here.
So when I drove 26 yesterday, it looks like it's just ready to take the cones off and get going again on that one particular one. But as you well know, as you get towards Othello and all the other places, towards Vantage, we need a lot more of those along the way. And we really appreciate all your support trying to get more of the things going on 26, because 195, which I drove today, I love that. I mean, it works out really well, and especially during the winter when you've got some bad weather there. Pat, go to you next.
Thank you. And let me join my other council members in welcoming you and thanking you for being here tonight. It's always, I need to get cues from the communications instructor here on utilizing the audiovisual equipment. In coming tonight, it's always a special night for us, and I think we all look forward to seeing you again in February. I would echo just about everything that everyone has talked about ahead of my speaking, and I certainly concur with Eileen and the proposal for the Kirkendall Road. Not so much that as just a vehicle that we can have to get that traffic moved from downtown. We're investing so much in the revitalization of downtown, and having that truck traffic go somewhere else would be the icing on the cake. I mean, just absolutely, truly. Housing affordability is a key issue. It always has been in Pullman. I think just by virtue of the fact that we are a student community and housing is stretched. Oftentimes, when my husband and I first moved here in 1975, it was 104% occupancy rate. So you couldn't find a place to live, and we just kind of continue to repeat that. So the missing middle piece of housing affordability is certainly an issue. Again, passing lanes going to Spokane, that's just a no-brainer anymore. It's just great. So not to belabor anything anyone else has said, but I concur with all that has been discussed, and of course we all join in on setting up these legislative priorities for you and look to you all for that guidance and helping us get some of these things accomplished. So thank you again, and happy Thanksgiving.
One of the things that we have on our list, and Mark, you mentioned about it briefly, and we do have Commander Aaron Brashears in the back row, and I know you're being quietly back there. But, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Aaron, but you're a commander. You're always on the spot. You have a chance, you might talk about some of these laws that you guys have had to deal with, the Blake Law, for example. You might have some local examples you might want to share as they go back to the legislature, try and work out some of the things that were passed, just trying to clean up some of the language. And if so, would you come up to the microphone on this too? And I'll give you plenty of time to think about it. But I serve on the Association of Washington Cities Legislative Priorities Committee, and we've had several meetings, and we actually heard from at least 5 different mayors on the west side talking about how that law has just impacted their communities, how people just go and break into stores, they take things out. Well, of course, Target, they didn't even pursue shoplifters, so they were just taking things out of there. And the fact that they couldn't pursue, and they said it's been just almost like a wide open situation on the west side. And I don't know exactly what I've heard from our sheriff, and I know that you guys have had to encounter some of these things too, Aaron. So
yes, we have. Overall, from my perspective regarding the Blake decision is, yes, we want to help people who have substance abuse problems. That's super important. The problem is when people are in if they're stuck in addiction, sometimes they don't do the right thing. Sometimes you have to force them to do something to help themselves. And currently, if you provide someone a piece of paper, which is a referral to go and get drug and alcohol counseling, which they may or may not follow up on, which may or may not be available, that doesn't help solve a problem. When I entered into law enforcement, if someone was arrested, taken to jail for one of these drug violations, they were at least clean while they were sitting in jail. There was a moment of clarity for them to evaluate their life and, hey, I really need to get things together. Did it solve the problems? No. There wasn't enough drug and alcohol counseling to really make a big change, but there at least was the stick to go along with the carrot, and the stick is gone. And getting people to force someone who is stuck in a cycle of addiction to actually make a change is extremely difficult. And with the level of potency of drugs that are out there now with fentanyl very, very accessible, that's a huge challenge.
Is that one of the major drugs you've been encountering here? I know you've dealt with a lot. I mean, we've had, and I hear it from our paramedics too, that they've had to deal with a mix of cocaine and alcohol and different combinations that have come in that you guys have had to deal with, so.
Yeah, we have, I spoke with a reporter the other day, and they were asking me some questions, so I went back and looked, and the Pullman Police Department alone, this doesn't count what the fire department has done, we've administered Narcan 11 times in the last 18 months. That would be 11 people who would be dead right now. And most of, Narcan works for heroin and fentanyl overdoses, and that's what it's there for. And it's doesn't seem to be slowing down.
Repeat that number again, just in case somebody missed it. 11 times in
11 times in the last 18 months.
That's incredible. And for our community, our size. So, any questions,
Yeah.
Aaron?
Is
Yes.
the admissions into the emergency room for alcohol poisoning increasing? And what are you seeing on campus in terms of just the kids getting way too out of hand in their parties with alcohol and maybe additive drugs that might go in with that?
I would say that, alcohol as a problem hasn't changed or significantly increased, recently. The fear again goes back to something like fentanyl, which potentially is you try it one time and it's an overdose and you die. Or if you unintentionally touch it as a first responder and don't know you touched it and absorbs through your skin and you overdose and you die. That is the far greater fear. Yes, there are still alcohol abuse cases and overdoses where they end up going to the hospital, and the fire department has transported lots of people. Is it significantly more than it has been in the years in past? I couldn't say that.
Yes, Nathan. And Mike Heston, do you want to make any comment from what you hear from your paramedics too on this? So you might give some updates after Nathan goes here. We'll just go to you too. Aaron, thank you so much.
I just had a question. I know when I was working on the marijuana impairment device with Dr. Lovrich, we saw a lot of polydrug, and that using marijuana on top of alcohol and then marijuana again mixed with caffeine was something that seemed to spike up the alcohol. Are you seeing that still?
Maybe not that specific combination, but anytime there is a pharmaceutical concoction, there are going to be a lot of increased effects. And even if it's something as simple as a prescribed antidepressant, if you combine that with alcohol, there are significant magnifying effects and of intoxication because of the combination of those two things. So anytime you mix and match, it creates problems.
Question, is there consensus of what the criminal penalty should be increased to for hard drugs in response to Blake?
I don't know if I could, speak to a consensus for law enforcement in general, but I think that a starting point would be if someone is in possession of one of these drugs, there should be the ability to make a physical custody arrest. And that is not the case right now.
Okay, are we looking at gross misdemeanor, Class C felony for repeat offenders? I mean, it's too darn low now. I think we all agree that that doesn't provide the carrot and the stick, but do you personally or have a position where that would be?
I don't know if a, calling it a felony versus calling it a gross misdemeanor, that statutory change, I don't know if that affects or or makes that much of a difference. I think that having the ability to do the physical custody arrest and maybe do some graduated penalties. Oh, this is your second time you've been arrested for this in the last 30 days. Well, now this is a felony now, or now you're going to the mandatory minimum. You have to stay in jail long enough until you can receive some inpatient treatment or something like that.
Okay.
Those are just ideas.
Okay. Thank you. Chief Heston.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, legislators, for coming too as well. So I agree with Aaron. We haven't seen a huge increase of those things. Obviously, we're getting back to normal after COVID, so things are picking up on our weekend calls. A lot of marijuana mixed with alcohol, mixed with other drugs we're seeing out there, overdoses, and we appreciate the police officers having the ability to give Narcan before we get there, because they are a lot quicker response out on the street because they're already out there. So the other thing for us is when you go on these mental health cases and they tell the police officers go away, that leaves us hanging out there to dry. And we don't have the training to be dealing with that, nor should we be dealing with any if it turns violence. So getting that coordination working together, and they do the best they can, but there's times that we're out there by ourselves sometimes, and the police are handcuffed and not able to deal with those kinds of students and other calls. So mental health is a huge issue for us out there. I think some education at the college level for coping skills and all those kinds of things would be awesome to start down that path, especially after COVID. Again, we're seeing a lot of those mental health calls, welfare checks. They're just constant all the time. So.
And especially after the Idaho murders, I saw on the police blotter we had a number of welfare checks going on from parents calling about their kids that they didn't call back on. Joe?
Would it be a correct assumption that the U.S. District Court that said a harm to themselves is no longer a reason for detention, the basis of a lot of the challenges that you're finding?
Where'd my law partner go? Oh, my God. See, I'm telling you, the bailout is right there. No, just kidding.
So, Aaron, would you come back
legally,
up here?
you'd have to answer that. So.
We have a good partnership with law enforcement here and the fire department, and we're supportive, I'll tell you that.
No, we work very well with them, and we do the best we can. And we have training in-house, so we understand what their limits are and, where we could cut some corners and work together and help these students and get them. But we've had times where they just have going down the road, the back of our ambulance, they just let them out. And you got to let them out when they're, still have the ability to make those decisions. And, we just pray to God that something doesn't happen to them or something to one of my firefighters. So I have to repeat that question, I guess, Joe. Sorry.
It's okay. There was a district court decision that said harm to oneself was no longer a reason for detention. And in the past, here was the reasons for detention were harm to yourself, harm to others, and then damage of physical property. Well, we removed that one instance for detention. And what my question is that the basis for a lot of the problems that you're having now in dealing with these folks that are struggling?
It's more than one aspect. And I'll go back just a little bit farther. So if previously, if we deemed someone was a danger to themselves or others, the law said it was the law enforcement officer shall take them into protective custody. It was mandatory. It would be the same mandatory requirement as if an officer responded to a domestic violence incident and he discovered probable cause for an arrest. You shall take that person into custody. Well, that was changed to May. Then, with some of the reform bills that came through, that greatly pushed that back even farther. And to answer your question more directly, for a while, taking someone to protective custody really was not even an option because of the second part of this, the use of force. We could not use force to make someone do something that they did not want to do because of the reform laws. So if an officer were to use force on someone to take them into protective custody at that time, that potentially could have been assault. And then you'd be looking as an officer of, well, I'm trying to help this person, but I'm physically forcing them to do this. Now am I potentially committing the crime of an assault? That has slowly kind of backed away in just this year with the state legislature addressing that and realizing, okay, this is a significant problem, and it's still a little bit vague for us, and so we're trying to do the best that we can. And okay, we're going to minimize our use of force as much as we possibly can for somebody that needs our help. And the reasoning, I'm not going to hurt you to help you. And that's kind of the court's decisions going through this, and so we're trying to abide by that the best we can.
But at the same time, you have to protect yourself, too. I mean,
Yes.
that's one of the big things, and we've had officers injured in different places that just have to deal with that statewide, so. Because, I mean, all of us are concerned about our officers and concerned about our people that work for us, too, and so we want to make sure they're protected. One thing that we've covered everything on our legislative priority list. Isn't that wonderful? And I haven't mentioned the airport. And I just want to mention this because Mark and all of you, we are so grateful for the help that you gave us from the city to get our get our sanitary sewer out to the new terminal. And we've got it out there, and the terminal is coming up, and it's going to be completed before the end of '23. And you can see walls up now, and you can see the foundation part. But it is, we're looking at other airports, and when Walla Walla goes down to one flight a day to Seattle, and Wenatchee's down to one flight a day, and Yakima's down to one flight, we're still running 5 flights a day to Seattle because we are doing the kind of business. And thanks to the University of Idaho and WSU, we've got a direct flight to Boise every day. Not every day, but most days. So again, we certainly would like to have that kind of support. And just one more question on the rail issue. Obviously, we'd like to get some kind of funding so we could get ways to help us get those big steel bands out of our roadway. And you guys can use them for other purposes. I know WashDOT has ways of using. Is there a different kind of, you mentioned one particular way of possibly funding that through trails and things of that nature. Is there other ways of possibly funding that so we could use some of that area?
Well, I think the first thing comes to mind without any policy change is WWRP. Community parks, community trails. I think we have a mechanism there, and I will say the Pullman community has been very, very good at grant writing.
Oh, yes. I look at some of them right out in front of us.
And I think that, rail banking it is probably the simplest inside the city limits. Then using an established vehicle rather than trying to reinvent the wheel is probably the easiest path forward.
And so to follow up on that, how do we, though, actually get that to happen? Like, we seem to run into roadblocks with that. So what is the suggested action to take for rail banking?
This is a lot longer conversation than we probably have time for tonight, because as of late, there's another complication that has now presented itself on the issue. Happy to talk with you about it.
All right. So we'll go by the council again. Is there any other last-minute item that you would like to bring up? And if not, we'll go to each of the legislators and we'll close off, and we'll start with Mark and then go to Mary and then Joe. So.
Thank you. I think this is one of the good traditions that's come about during my career representing Pullman in the 9th District. I think we value our local electeds more than we do lobbyists. Cities seem to think they haven't achieved status unless they hire a lobbyist. I'd rather see any member of the Pullman City Council than see tax dollars going to yet another lobbyist. So I like the way you do business. I like the direction we're going, and we just need to continue it. Thankfully, it's going to be back to in-person again. May we never have a virtual session again. And I mean it. I'm not kidding. I mean, I've gone to lunch with Eileen in Olympia. We've got things we agree on, we talk about in person. Glenn's been over many, many times, Francis and others. You have a relationship, you have questions, rather than a paid lobbyist and a video screen. The biggest threat to our state is a virtual session. The only good thing that came out of this was virtual testimony is now here to stay. The House hated it and wouldn't do it at all. The Senate was doing some, but not enough. And I think the ability to have the Pullman Fire Police Department testify rather than coming that distance at taxpayer expense, that's good. But virtual needs to go away. Thankfully, we're going to have a real session, it looks like.
And I did appreciate testifying virtually. Well, I didn't have to drive over there, or sometimes you get the notice, you need to get over here tomorrow, if you can today, it's great, but no, it was helpful. I testified about 3 or 4 different times on different bills, and they had the mechanism was very good. I mean, they had the timer there, they had everything ready to go. So that part I really liked, and especially saving taxpayers money for driving over there. Mary?
Well, I can't agree more with Senator Schessler on the fact that this is a great community to work with, and so many things that you bring to us, it's really easy to advocate for because it's so well prepared. I know Gladys has always been a beneficiary of really good organization, and I think that you capitalize on that with your downtown work. Some of the transportation issues, I think that just in conversations with the members of the Transportation Committee in the House, that they did pretty good on the supplemental budget, but they realized they kind of missed on half of the state, and I think that there's going to be some consideration of us and some of the needs that we have in Pullman should be really high on our list, because you're right, the traffic flow in this city has always been complicated, and if you have a good proposal, let's bring it forward while we have people that really want to kind of repair some of the relationships that were harmed during the COVID, now that we can start really working with our new colleagues and also some of the long-term experienced colleagues. I think that that's kind of first priority, is to start building the relationships back, and I think that there's some goodwill that can be built in the transportation. So I'm looking forward to the work. I can hardly wait till you can come back over and be in the building with us, and hopefully no fears. Thank you.
Okay. Joe Schmick.
Thank you for having us. It's a good tradition. Always look forward to coming here. I'm going to give you my cell phone number. This is my legislative cell phone. And I'll just delay here a second, so you're ready. That number is 360-545-5999. Is that a 9? 5978. Sorry, it's so small, I can't read it. Please call me. I will always return your call. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get back with everyone, but that is my cell phone number. Don't be bashful and not use it. So thank you for having us.
And I personally want to thank all 3 of you for being so responsive to all of us and being available. First and third months, we always, when the legislature is meeting, we have our government affairs for the Chamber of Commerce. You're there at 7:30 in the morning, and you're there for the half hour with us, and you answer our questions, you tell us what you're looking at that week. We really appreciate that, and again, you've been so responsive when we contact you with some kinds of problems, and you get right back to us. And Joe sometimes is even, and Mark is the same thing, and Mary, I'll get a text message. Okay, how is this going to impact Pullman? And I'm going, thank you very much. We'll start making some phone calls and get back to you on it. So again, we just appreciate how responsive all 3 of you are to the city and to our residents as well. So thank you again for being here. We're going to take about a 5-minute break because I know some people want to talk to you, and then we're going to start our council meeting. We have a number of things on our agenda. So right now we'll take a break at 8:10. We'll come back in 5 minutes. And Rob, that's also a cue to you for that. Okay, thank you. It's 8:16 here now, and we've had a chance to be with our legislators. Again, we want to thank them for appearing before us, as they do every year, and again, they are very, very accessible to us, and we are very appreciative of that. At this point on the agenda, this is public comment for anyone who would like to make a comment about any final action the council may take tonight. Only dealing with final action, nothing else than that. And I don't see anyone coming forward, so with that, we'll move on. We now move to the consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature, and the council's had a chance to study these ahead of time. Do I hear a motion to read by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, our city attorney Thad is getting his microphone ready to go. He has now turned it on, and he is ready to go with the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item is a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the special meeting of November 7, 2022, and approve them as submitted. The second item is a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 108464 through 108482, electronic transfers 85, 86, 928, and 933 through 938, payroll direct deposits numbered 80800 through 81147, totaling $1,478,945.77. The third is a motion to ratify the Grand Avenue Center Street pavement repair contract. The fourth item is a motion to accept the Grand Avenue Center Street pavement repair contract as complete.
Is there any item the council would like off for discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 4. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we now start item G in the agenda. This is the public hearing on our 2023-24 mayor's proposed budget. Mike Urban, our city administrator, and finance guru is on the line here.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This next agenda item before you is the public hearing for the 2023-2024 mayor's proposed budget. So as per RCW 35.34, the city is required to maintain a timely process for adopting this biennial budget. And as such, the Pullman City Council adopted a budget calendar on July 12th. Further, RCW 8455 talks about a public hearing needs to be held with respect to revenues prior to setting the yearly property tax levy. That public hearing did occur on September 27th. So that brings us to RCW 35.34 today, which requires the legislative body to hold a public hearing on the budget so that any taxpayer may be heard for or against any part of the mayor's proposed budget. So this agenda item serves as that public hearing, so we could have a discussion later tonight as an agenda item and then hopefully bring back a complete ordinance for you on Tuesday, November 29th for adoption. So the budget schedule is attached to this agenda item as well as the updated proposed budget. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the council before the hearing or after if necessary.
Any questions? Not? At this time, we open a public hearing. Anybody who would like to make any comments regarding the proposed budget, this is the time to come forward. If there's anyone who would like to make any comments regarding the budget. Going once, twice. We've had some pretty good airings on this already. So with that, we'll close the public hearing. We now move to the regular agenda item. And our first item is an ordinance before you, fixing the amount of the tax levy for the year 2022 for collection. And I'll make sure. Okay.
Thank you again. So just a really short PowerPoint. I kept it to 5 slides, including this one. So, you know, already working on my New Year's resolution of brevity and thoroughness at the same time. So before you tonight for your consideration are several ordinances. General property tax levies. We are talking specifically about the city of Pullman portion of your property tax collection in the community. The 2022 amount was $14 and about 83 cents per $1,000 assessed value. So what those dollars go to fund is our general fund expenses. As you can see, fire and ambulance, law enforcement, our public safety group, that's about 67% of the total budget, as well as the library, parks and recreation, community economic development, and administrative services such as legal, HR, finance, legislative. And these are all in the budget book as well. This one isn't in the budget book, but it was part of the revenue presentation earlier. And what had happened in the first go-around is we didn't know what our estimated new construction was until after the budget hearing. At that point, we've since gotten those projected new construction valuations at $40,609,837. And what that did is we broke it down into what would a 1% increase to the city regular levy, the EMS levy, and the Metro Parks levy, how the 1% increase plus taking the new construction would affect those dollars. And then just for a gentle reminder, in case some folks at home are new to this, the 1% increase does not affect the bond portion creation, but the new construction spreads that bond tax across a bigger group. So the bond part tends to go down a few pennies per thousand when we bring in the new construction. So these are the new calculations which are listed in each of the ordinances that will come before you in a few moments. And so what does a 1% levy increase on property tax mean if you have an assessed value house of $250,000 or $300,000, and then I put $412,500 as well because that was the average sale price of a home in Pullman last month. And you see that the 2022 amount going up to the 2023 estimate, it changes $7.69 on a $250,000 home up to $12.69 a year on a $412,000 home. So the total increase really per $1,000 of assessed value of what's being proposed in these ordinances as well as the original budget is just barely over 3 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. So are there any questions before I get into each of the ordinances?
Any questions on that?
Okay. So before you first is ordinance number 22-23, fixing the amount of tax levy for collection in 2023 to raise revenues to meet estimated expenditures and establishing the special levy to meet the general obligation debt service. So back to the RCWs, 84.55 again requires a public hearing on revenue sources to be conducted first, and that happened on September 27th. And since that time, there's been no additional comments received by the Finance Department. And although the city has adopted a biennial budget process, property taxes do need to be set every year and approved by the Whitman County Commissioners so that those can be collected by the treasurer on our behalf. And due to the cost increases for the City of Pullman government operations to provide services and programs to the community, staff is recommending capturing the additional new revenue resulting from all new construction, improvements to property, changes in assessed value and any annexations, as well as increasing the prior year levy amount by the statutory maximum rate of 1%. And with that, staff recommends that council approve ordinance number 22-24 as presented.
And again, we're dealing with 8 to 9% inflation, and we're talking about a 1% increase.
Sorry, 22-23. I got ahead on my next one.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Do I hear a motion on this ordinance?
Move to adopt ordinance number 22-23.
Second.
Moving second. Ty, would you read the ordinance, please?
Yes. Ordinance number 22-23, an ordinance fixing the amount of the tax levy for the year 2022 for collection in 2023 to raise revenue to meet estimated expenditures and establishing the special levy to meet general obligations bond debt service obligations.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Move now to item number 2 on our agenda tonight, another ordinance, and this one deals with the emergency medical services. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. So this next item is very, very similar to the last item. Ordinance 22-24 strictly deals with the EMS levy. So we present each of these separately as per state law and the request of the county. So everything I mentioned before about the public hearing remains true. That happened on the 27th. No additional comments were received on this item as well. So due to the increased costs for the City of Pullman government operations to provide services and programs to the community, staff is recommending first, capturing the additional new revenue resulting from all new construction, improvements to property, changes in assessed value and annexations, as well as increasing the prior year levy by 1%, which is the maximum statute. And with that, staff recommends adopting ordinance 22-24 as presented.
Any questions on this? Do I hear a motion on this ordinance?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thad, would you please read ordinance 22-24?
Yes. Ordinance number 22-24, an ordinance fixing the amount of the emergency medical services tax levy for the year 2022 for collection in 2023 to raise revenue to meet estimated expenditures.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? At this time, we're going to adjourn the meeting of the City Council and convene the meeting of the Special Metropolitan Park District meeting. We have already taken roll earlier this evening of the commissioners. With that, we have a regular agenda item, a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the Metropolitan Park District for the meeting of October 18th, 2022, and approve as submitted. Do I hear a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we have now a resolution. MPD 22-1. Mike Urban.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners. We transition now to our Metropolitan Parks District hats, and we talk about tax levies as well. Very similar to the previous 2 items presented. Public hearing was held for the Metropolitan Parks District on September 27th to discuss revenues. And same piece, that although that we've adopted a biennial budget, we still have to come back and produce this every year to make sure that our collections stay relevant with the county and the assessor's office as well as the treasurer. So due to the cost increases for Pullman Metropolitan Parks District operations to provide services and programs to the community, staff is recommending, number 1, capturing the additional new revenue resulted from new construction, improvements to property, changes in assessed value in any annexations, as well as increase the prior year levy amount by the statutory maximum of 1%. And with that, we recommend adopting resolution MPD 22-1 as presented.
Any questions on this? If not, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. And Thad, do you want to read the resolution? And if you don't have it before you, I will do it right now. A resolution fixing the amount of the property tax levy for the year 2022 for collection in 2023 to raise revenue to meet estimated expenditures for Pullman Metropolitan Parks District. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That would go now to item number 3 on the Metropolitan Park District agenda, a motion authorizing Pullman City Council to acquire 2.81 acres of property. We've been looking forward to this for some time, and we're going to have it here and also in the council agenda for the purposes to fund a purchase as per contract presented. Mike Urban.
Thank you. So yes, again, this is a very exciting day because Veterans Monument is something I've been working on personally for a decade in whatever jurisdiction I've been in. But what we have here is prior to 2017, the city wanted to acquire this 2.81 acres. And if Mr. Baker can put up the slide with the map, I can show, or do I just close it here? Got it. Bang. Well, it went up for a second. There it is. So the piece of property in question here is directly south of Fairmont Drive and directly west of our existing city cemetery. Triangular piece, for lack of a better term, but 2.81 acres. So in 2017, the city So in April of 2017, the city conducted an appraisal, and at that time, the value of the parcel was determined to be $685,000. And the reason that this agricultural land appraised so high is because of all the development that's gone on around that area. It is now commercial property. So since then, commercial property has appreciated. But Bishop Acres LLC and DFLC LLC, co-owners of this property, still wish to divest of this and still believes in the city's vision of turning this into a park with a veterans monument. So they are willing to go into a contract with the city to sell this property for $300,000 plus closing costs. And in addition, to help with the cash flow, they're willing to fund this obligation in 5 yearly payments at $60,000 each at 0% interest. First payment due obviously in December of this year for various reasons. I won't get into the tax code as much as I'd love to, but I miss flexing that muscle from time to time. To afford this purchase, it is a Metro Parks purchase. That's why it will be a park, but we wanted the motion from a Metropolitan Parks District Board to approve the mayor entering into this contract, and then council will take action to approve that as a resolution when we go back into that meeting. So that's just a real quick history on this. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? We can also thank Ted Weatherly for a lot of the work that we've had a number of meetings, and Kirk Damon is back there, and we've had the meetings sometimes on the side of a pickup out there on Fairmont and different kinds of weather, talking to the owners. And all I got to say is these owners have been just remarkable in dealing with us, knowing the importance of a Veterans Memorial and having the American Legion behind it, going off and trying to do some fundraising with it, but just allowing us to get into this. I heard one comment saying, well, I wonder how that property is priced. They have really helped us tremendously. We're considering what that price was basically assessed. Now, Eileen, you may have had a comment. Okay.
Yeah, so many people have done so much amazing work on this and getting it together. The location is absolutely outstanding. It's, you know, I'm so proud to be serving on the council at this time that we're putting this together. And thanks to the property owners and those folks who know that this is a wonderful thing for our community. Let's get her done.
Nathan, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to say, especially, it's very timely with the Veterans Day having happened recently, and we may not, most of us don't realize how many veterans are here in this community, and meeting several of them last week, and then also several of my friends are veterans as well. I think this is the very least we can do. And I know, speaking to them, they want to strengthen that connection with the city of Pullman. This is a step in the right direction.
I'll entertain a motion at this time on this item number 3.
Move to adopt.
Second.
That's a motion authorizing Pullman City Council to acquire 2.81 acres of property for parks purposes and to fund the purchase as per contract presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we now adjourn the meeting of the Metropolitan Park District. We now convene the meeting once again, reconvene the City Council. And with that, we now have a resolution before you. And we have Megan Vining, our Recreation Manager, come before you. And we also will deal with this parks a little bit later. So, Megan Vining, Resolution R6522 is all yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for having me here again, twice in like the last 3 weeks. Crazy. Annually, the Public Services Department reviews program fees and facility charges for the upcoming year and presents them to the City Council for their consideration and approval. At the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting on October 12, 2022, Commission members endorsed the changes that I will present. Before I get started, and as I explained to the Commission members, as prices have risen across the country, as we all know, Recreation staff took it as a signal to review and analyze our finances, fees, and charges. The price increase on our programs will help us to continue to provide the programs and activities the community enjoys and relies on, while continuing to be able to cover the costs of our facilities, equipment, and staffing. This is an area that none of our staff enjoy or want to do, but we also need to be fiscally responsible. With minimum wage increasing $1.25 per hour on January 1st, 2023, and also the increase that we are facing with third-party charges, such as the cost of umpires and officials for lots of our different programs. This really impacts our fees and causes us really no choice but to move forward with fee increases. In your packet, you have an attached memo with the highlighted areas of our few key specific program areas, and I will point out a few of those changes on the memo. First is our youth sports area. You can see there are about 7 different sports listed. All of them are raising about $10 per season per player. This increase is really a direct reflection of staffing, equipment, and operating expenses. As you can see with the prices, all the sports differ a little bit on the length of the season, number of practices, and the length of the game sessions, and also, what is provided as part of the program. So, any questions on the sports?
Apparently not.
Okay. The next increase is preschool program. Our preschool fees are a direct reflection as well of staffing wage increase and operating expenses, and to continue the current high standard of program that we do provide. We did raise the daily fee to $17 for the 2022-2023 school year, trying to offset the 2022 minimum wage increase. However, with the $1.25 per hour increase in January, and then again the projected increase for 2024, we need to get ahead of the wages that are imposed upon us and be able to adjust with staffing wages to retain and or recruit for our quality education program that we do have. Currently, our preschool program is based on about $5.66 per hour, or $17 a day, and we are raising it to $19 a day, which is approximately $6.33 per hour for the students. Does anybody have any questions on preschool? Okay. The next is adult sports fitness section. As you can see, the adult sports increase is also a direct reflection of staffing, equipment, operating, and third-party charges. The first one, the co-ed volleyball, that is just directly a price increase. The next 3 are programs that are brand new to our department that were either created the latter half of 2022 or brand new for 2023, and they need to be added to our fee schedule for that. And those last 3, the sand volleyball, soccer, dodgeball, those are all added new programs as a direct request by participants in our community. Any questions on those? Okay. The next section is Pullman Aquatic and Fitness Center and Rainy Pool lane rentals. And that lane rental fee needed to be raised to be able to cover the staffing costs with the minimum wage increase and the increase in operating fees. Our current lane rental fee for the non-operating hours was directly not covering the direct staff that were there to open and supervise the pool. With the lane rental raising from $4.80 to $9 per lane per hour, that will cover the 2 staff that will be there to operate the pool at the time. Any questions on that? Okay. And the other part of the aquatic center is the additional fee of $30 is added to match the requirement of the additional fee for additional staff that are required for the number of participants. So as the number of participants go up of being in the pool, we need to bring on additional staff to cover that cost. Any questions? Okay. And 2 more. The locker rental at the aquatic center, We have decreased that fee, and that is an attempt to encourage more Aquatic Center members, seniors, and WEX participants to be able to purchase locker rentals and not have the cost be prohibited, along with purchasing a membership or a WEX punch card for them to be able to be in the pool. And then the last one is our program fee policy. And essentially, we're raising the bottom line in our program fee schedule from it was 10% to 40%, now raising it from 20% to 40%. And the reason of raising the bottom line minimum percentage is, again, due to the increase in the administrative costs to be able to offer our programs. Administrative costs include advertising, building, facility charges for operating our facilities, registration, financial fees, and staffing. We do have that variable admin fee so we can be flexible with our customers and be able to promote equitable access across the board for our programs and for participants. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
Okay, Becky, we'll go to you first.
Megan, does the scholarship program, the Care to Share, is that still in effect, and is that fairly well funded?
Yes, it is still in effect. There's no changes with that. That is, the percentage is still there. In fact, I just got some numbers the other day. We've given out about 100 awards this year. We have given out roughly almost $6,300 in scholarships for 2022. We have roughly about $20,000 in the account because we were generous. We were recipients of 2 fairly big, generous donations from Pullman Child Welfare for our swimming program, as well as some team programs and some other activities.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah.
That's wonderful news. You've got 20,000 in there. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is great. I really appreciate you explaining why the increases and so on.
Yeah.
This is more for the communications director, and I see Mike there. So, families are feeling the pinch, I know, and they're going to continue to feel that pinch. And so being able to communicate exactly why this is occurring and that it will help to bring continuing excellence from our Parks and Rec department, I think is essential. So I know several council members have spoken to the importance of communication, and I hope that we can do that. I'm just looking at Mike there, so thank you so much.
On that point of communicating, I do plan to, with our next upcoming activity guide, which will be released December 14th, and our next registration will start December 19th. We will put a few boxes in the activity guide that say, you'll notice that a few of the fees are being raised, so they will have that acknowledgement in there, as well as I plan to be able to put out some information, social media posts with Matt Young as well.
And you've certainly justified it tonight, too, and going through this in terms about what just the cost of trying to hire people, and with the minimum wage going up. I can see you've been struggling with that budget because we've been going through that.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that. Any other comments?
Yes.
Ann? Okay, Becky.
Just one more, following up on Councilmember Weller's comment about getting the word out. At the same time, if we could get word out about the Care to Share, because I am concerned that this would negatively impact families who are already struggling. So, especially since we have all those funds in there. So
Absolutely. We do quite a bit in our activity guide, but I do, we'll make sure and get that out more. Yep.
And just, you might remind people, since Becky has mentioned this, about the Care to Share, it's not a real requirement in terms of you have to give income or like that. You need it.
Yep, we have all the families, they do need to fill out a form, so we do have that. There's a few different items that they can choose if they receive free lunch, if they Medicaid, I should say, or housing, anything to do with that, or energy assistance. Generally, we try to make it work for everyone. They can get up to 50% off of one activity, which would be up to like $40, or they can split that up and do 2 activities for an activity guide, so they get $20 off. So they could get a reduced activity for 2 different sports, or 2 different, a babysitting class and a manners class, or also working with Plus Discovery Science Center. They have some scholarship dollars that we work with them on as well to be able to give families not only our Care to Share program, but also with the Science Center.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Other than that, do I hear a motion on this resolution?
move to adopt the resolution.
Second.
Moved and seconded for the resolution R6522, a resolution amending the fee schedule for parks and recreation programs and facility use effective January 1st, 2023. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Megan. With that, we now go to resolution R6622. Something familiar just a few minutes ago. With that, Mike Urban.
Thank you. A few minutes ago, the Metropolitan Parks Board authorized the City Council to consider Resolution R66-22 that authorizes the mayor and Finance and Administrative Services Director to take actions necessary to enter into a purchase and sale agreement to acquire 2.81 acres of property for Veterans Park, working title. Just a couple things I want to add since the last time I was up here. One, the benefit of this is moving folks from Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and other presentations from a very busy street downtown to a little quieter area, bigger area to hold more folks in attendance. Two, couldn't be done without the express help of the families that own Bishop Acres LLC and DFLC LLC. And the third, retired Police Chief Ted Weatherly's group at the American Legion is ready to take up the charge of fundraising for the Veterans Monument portion. And as soon as we can acquire the land, I think they're ready to get going on fundraising, and we can start looking at what this property is going to look like eventually. So with that, staff does recommend the City Council authorize the mayor into this agreement and adopt Resolution 6622 as presented.
And we have seen some artist conceptions of this. Some of it was designed by WSU architecture students that Ted showed us that really looks beautiful. That will be really nice. And of course, you have architecture students and they still need to have engineered and all those kind of things that have to go along with it. But we've seen some really good sites that this could be just quite an attraction. But most important, to honor veterans and for what they have done for this country. And it's just, again, dealing with the families that are selling it to us. They couldn't have been nicer in dealing with this. Do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt Resolution R-66-22.
Second.
Thad, do you want to read it?
This is Resolution R-66-22, a resolution authorizing the mayor and finance and administrative services director to take all actions necessary to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with Bishop Acres LLC and DFLC LLC for the acquisition of certain real property to be converted from agricultural use to city park use, including the development of a veterans monument and other matters related thereto.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all, and we want to thank the veterans that are with us tonight here. Thank you for being here. And Ted wanted to be here, and he really wanted to be here so much tonight, but I think he was still traveling. So, again, thank you. With that, we now move to item number 5, a motion to authorize the mayor to execute a contract on ComputerNet. And Mike, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. And sorry, it's the Mike show tonight. You guys had shot at RJ the last time, but we're here tonight because about 8 weeks ago, our IT department started to receive alerts on our data storage growth, and it was expanding at a higher rate than previously experienced and affecting our full capacity. So after the IT department went and did some exploration as to what was going on and what had changed, we learned really there was 5 things that was driving this change. One is the stored video across previously existing departments, and this doesn't include the police body cams. That's somewhere else, but it does include things like surveillance footage that is turned in as part of cases, and that could also be transit. They do have their video cameras as well if we have to hold things for other pieces, and as well as Ring Central meetings. Another item is our scanning operations has hit a new gear. We're getting rid of a lot of paper, especially downstairs, and turning that into ones and zeros in pictures that live on our server. A big factor is the new GIS department. That work takes up a lot of room and increased the volume substantially. The new communications department, as well as their videos and some of their storage needs. And then really the underlying factor too, and I would say this was definitely fifth out of the five, but we have more staff producing more work. So having that available, and with the public records request laws, keeping that available has become very critical. So the timing of this discovery was really quite unfortunate because we had just put the CIP to bed and everything was being turned in for the budget, so we couldn't really incorporate in the CIP because it had already happened, and the budget was on a schedule, and once we realized here's where we were and what's going on, this had to come kind of live alone. It was kind of a perfect storm in those items. So because of that, staff was prepared to utilize the $60,000 of unplanned projects in the CIP, and that was going to buy 10 terabytes of storage. And when we looked at that as a little bit of a cost value standpoint, I asked the IT department to go do some additional research on that, because then we'd be right back here a year later. And what they discovered is they can buy 45 terabytes on what's essentially the state contract through NASPO for $138,575.24, including taxes. So the cost goes down significantly. We're getting 4.5 times the storage for a little more than 2 times the cost. So knowing that we've been collecting interfund fees from the different departments for this type of a purchase that we were expecting later next year or even into 2024, we thought it was in the best interest of the organization and the community, taxpayers, to bring this back as an option, since we can fund it out of the reserves in the IT department and gain that extra room for at least another 4 years is what it looks like when we project it out. Now, I did have them go back and look at the option of cloud storage, and the break-even point for that when they did their analysis was just slightly less than 7 years, with ongoing costs going after that, because you still need to do cloud storage in perpetuity for the public records retention piece. So based on the data sovereignty issues, those are words that the IT department gave to me, where we're basically holding the data on site instead of trusting a third-party cloud server. Rules around the Public Records Act when it comes to data retention and that cost-benefit analysis, and the fact that we can fund this project, staff is recommending to the council to allow, or to pass by motion allowing the mayor to enter into this agreement with NASPO. And then what we would do is, because of the backlog and the bottleneck, especially on IT products, as soon as we know that the equipment is coming and in the year it is going to be billed, because we're staring 2023 in the face, we'd bring back a budget amendment to handle that piece. But according to our procurement policy 1-107, council does need to take action on this type of a purchase. So that's a lot in a very short period of time. I'd be happy to answer any questions on this.
Any questions? Seeing none, do I hear a motion on this?
Move to adopt.
Second.
The motion to authorize the mayor to execute a contract with the CompuNet utilizing the NASPO purchasing contract for additional 45 terabytes of citywide data storage. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, council. Thanks for all.
Now Mike gets a break, and Jennifer Hackman comes before us with a motion to authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with DH Communications.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. The Economic Development Department is coming to you tonight seeking your guidance on entering into an agreement to participate in awareness campaign around the Small Business Flex Fund. The city was brought this opportunity by DH Communications, which is an agency out of Spokane. They've been partnering with the Department of Commerce to help build more awareness for this loan product. And so they looked to the city and called me up and said, can you help us? Can you partner with us? What this would look like would be the city doing one-on-one awareness around the program to businesses, doing some advertising, presentations, and the like. The loan itself is a really good, flexible product, and we haven't seen a whole lot of businesses take advantage of it in Pullman, and so the Department of Commerce thinks there's opportunity. So this agreement sets out the scope of work, reporting requirements, timeline, and compensation. And the work would begin immediately. The program is available through mid-February. So just note that that program is coming up as we're looking at downtown construction. And so this could be one product, one tool the businesses could use to get through that in preparation. I wish the program were going to be available through the summer, but it's not. It's just available through February, so we would need to get on top of it and get the word out to businesses. Now, this is available to small businesses and nonprofits who were impacted by the pandemic, but it's a pretty flexible program. And so it could be used for reinvestment, for staffing, for a lot of different uses. And so staff recommends that council move to authorize the mayor to enter into the agreement. I'd be happy to take any questions or listen to any comments.
Okay, Nathan?
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Jennifer, I'm all for us moving forward on this. I know as a business owner and talking to other business owners, entering into more loans, especially right now, is a little scary. And I will just pass along, because I know you work with, Department of Commerce and so on. Additional grants are needed by small business owners and nonprofits alike. Being a part of several nonprofits, we've received help here in Eastern Washington, but we need more. And having a loan, as it's still a little challenging. So I'm all for this, and you're just getting it because, you're kind of our go-to, and you're doing a great job. I know you are, but I'm just passing that along.
I appreciate those comments. I'll pass them along.
Any other comments to that? Do I hear a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
A motion to authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with DH Communications, Inc. to perform work on behalf of the Department of Commerce in a COVID-19 relief program for local businesses.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That we now
Thank you, Council.
leave action items. We move into discussion items. And our first discussion here is a project downtown, the continuing project. Sean Colts, our Public Works Director. Sean?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Since we last met a few weeks ago with the Welch-Comer design team, the design team has met with city staff as well as the steering committee to talk about several of the design concepts and bring some new information back to council. So we wanted to get another touch with council and get some direction on the design and moving that forward. And with that, I will pass the baton to the design team, but I'll load up the presentation first.
Thanks, Sean. Good evening, Council. Mr. Mayor, Matt Gillis, Welch-Comer Engineers, with my colleagues Courtney Kramer and Dell Hatch. It's good to be here. I know you've had a long night, so we will be as brief but as thorough as possible. As Sean mentioned, we have just a few critical items that we want to focus on that we'd really like your feedback on, and those are ADA parking, and I'll get into that in just a moment. There's a slightly new opportunity we'd like to discuss, potential parking on Pine and Kamiakin, parking changes, and then finally the whole street tree discussion, which Dell will lead us through. We really would like to walk out with direction on those three items. That would be very helpful to us to keep moving forward. So we'll jump right into it. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to jump in and stop me at any point. So from an ADA parking standpoint, ADA meaning the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's a federal requirement we all have to follow, okay, when we're building public infrastructure. So at a baseline, that's a standard we must follow. The step up from that is called the PROWAG, the Public Rights-of-Way Accessibility Guideline. It's not law, but it's a good guideline specifically in urban areas. And so we feel that it is a better standard and should be used when possible and where possible. And so our current strategy, barring changes from you all, is to utilize the PROWAG where we can and utilize at a minimum, the ADA. So if we go with the PROWAG from a ADA parking stall standpoint, we need, well, let me back up. The ADA doesn't require any ADA stalls on street. The PROWAG does recommend it. And the recommendation is 1 ADA stall per block, okay? And so I've tried to highlight this. I don't know if the mouse works or not. But anyway, the red clouds are where we are preliminarily showing ADA parking stalls. What I mean by that is an accessible stall where somebody in a wheelchair can get off the street with relative ease. So we've got 1 per block shown currently. That's our current strategy. I believe that's our recommended strategy that meets a published standard and it exceeds a required standard, which I believe is in the best interest of this project. And so that's really all I have to report on that. Would love any questions or feedback you have on the direction that we've headed so far.
Go to Becky first.
I think that's wonderful. I love the PROWAG and that we're getting as many spaces out there as possible.
Ann.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, just to clarify, you're recommending 1 per block, but is that graphic just a representation of what it looks like? Because that looks like 2 spaces, the blue on the brick.
So, I'm sorry, at Grand and Olson?
The actual photograph of the
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
stands?
that was just, that's just an example.
Thank you.
That's an example.
Just
My
want to
apologies.
clarify. Thank you. No, that's okay.
Okay, Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, PROWAG, of course. Now I'm looking at these different colors. Are those where you are suggesting the spots be?
The colors are just to represent the block.
The blocks, but I mean the circles, is that where you're suggesting?
That's correct. That's correct. So the red clouds represent where the actual accessible stall is, and then the red arrow is the block at which it's attributed to.
Okay. I will say, well, a few things. Looking at the businesses that are in those colored areas, my opinion, you're probably going to have more people going towards the blue and the purple than the tan area. I think there's there's actually two buildings that are deserted at this point, where you're putting one of the red circles. So the light tan right there, the yellow. And the bulk of businesses, the darker blue, maybe okay, so that's color, is a little different than that. Okay, so kind of this, grayish blue, that is primarily a lot of apartments that already have underground and no businesses, well, very few businesses underneath those apartments. So what I think, I appreciate what you're doing with the PROWAG, but I would also like to see planning around where those bulk of businesses are right now, because I know my mom has, ADA needs. And I know the purple area is where some of her friends would like to be able to go. And that's a long way for the corner of the purple to travel on down to, for instance, Bruised Books or, anything, Black Cypress, any of those businesses. And the blue, the back of the blue, that has parking already. I don't know what businesses that would be getting to. On the back of the blue? That's, the library is on the other side.
Library.
Yeah. The light blue.
Councilmember Weller, we're happy to relocate and work with staff on what the best actual precise location of the stalls are. But from an overall strategy of one stall per block, I think that's the primary feedback we need tonight. Again, great feedback. I'm happy to slide things around.
We can do that later, yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just giving feedback, as far as looking at the businesses that are in those locations.
No, that's great.
Versus the abandoned buildings.
Okay. Eileen.
Yeah, just real quick, we will need to make some adjustments there, as Nathan has suggested. And I want to point out that this is a priority for this council, as you well know. And as I've mentioned before, I went out there with my tape measure, and the ADA parking that we do have, most of it does not meet ProWAG standard. The only one that does is at the library. So what we've got is inadequate, and it's, we're going to change that.
Okay. And so you've heard to go ahead on ProWAG and one per,
Yes, sir. And I will
Okay.
move on.
So we got that one done. Now
Thank
let's
you
move
very
to the
much.
next one.
That's very, very good. We're fully aware that the council did not select Pine and Kamiakin to be reconstructed as part of this overall project, and that's not what we're saying. But the steering committee felt pretty strongly about, months ago now, converting the parallel parking that's currently on both streets to angle parking, okay, on one side of the street. We don't get a gain in parking, it's just a slightly different way to do it, right? Parallel versus angle. One's just slightly more accessible. And so they asked us to move that idea forward to the council. Now, again, it's not a request to add two $800,000 projects to the overall scope. It's more like a $10,000 pavement marking exercise where we remove pavement markings and change pavement markings so that we can get a better parking situation. Also, we can get a much better ADA configuration because we can make parallel parking work with ADA. It's a little bit awkward, but it's much better for the user if it's angle parking. And so I don't know if I can point at the TV. I can't, but I can point up at the screen here.
And plus, there are some people that prefer parking like this as opposed to trying to parallel park.
Correct. So our recommendation is this is added. Again, it's low cost in the grand scheme of things. If we do it, there'd be some slight modifications to the curb bulbs, nothing that can't be undone at this point. We're early in design. This is probably a better overall situation. Happy to answer any questions on that, if there's any concern.
Okay.
So it would be parking on just one side of the street then?
Yes, ma'am, it'd be
both
on
of
the
those?
west side, and full disclosure, it would be only accessible for southbound traffic.
Okay.
Right? Because it's kind of angled the opposite way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Seen a lot of head nods on that one.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Council. I'm going to turn it over to Del Hatch, and he's going to lead us through most of the discussion about the trees.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Good to be with you again. We gave you somewhat of a similar presentation when we were here last month. Since then, we've been looking at the issues of the trees with quite a bit of clarity and detail. We've been visiting with some of your city staff. We've also visited with the steering committee. And one of the things that we want to do is just briefly go over where we've been and where we're at today. The public comments about the trees, we heard very clearly that those are what the community felt contributed to the character of the downtown. Very important from an aesthetic standpoint. They're quite mature at this point. Impossible to replace them in the condition they are now. We talked about the issues of making your now widened sidewalks more people-centric. And we've talked a little bit about where the trees would be maintained would now be pretty much in the center of the sidewalk on the north side, which does not fully benefit the most people-centric condition on your sidewalk. We also talked last time about what it will take to save those trees, both through the exercise of demolition and then through construction. And then we talked a little bit about the challenges of making our sidewalk cross slopes meet ADA conditions from threshold to edge of curb at the street. And then there's some issues with the trees themselves. They've been, as you all know, they've been pruned quite high. That follows your current ordinance of 16.5 feet in terms of downtown trees in proximity to the street. And that's mainly to keep your travel lanes clear from the crown of the tree, things like that. And in a lot of cases, especially on the north side, is to get that crown above the multiple awnings that occur there. We shared with you last time that we had just completed a complete tree inventory of all of the trees within the project study. 76 trees, they've all been tagged. They've had a thorough assessment by one of my colleagues who's a landscape architect and an arborist. And we photographed those trees extensively for record of their health, their condition, their size, and all of the surrounding conditions as well. So that if you look at this exhibit, in that initial assessment, there were only 4 trees that we felt those trees should probably come out. They're not necessarily the most appropriate species for the location. There were some issues with those trees, whether it was their ultimate form or their health. So only the 4 out of the 76. The other trees that you see there that were simply colored in blue were trees that were felt to be healthy and had necessarily no visible concerns with regard to any effect to the sidewalks or the curbs. However, the remainder of the trees, the vast majority of those trees that you see that are also highlighted in yellow, showed quite a bit of sidewalk concrete damage to both the sidewalks and the curbs. So throughout Main Street, there's an awful lot of that condition. So 18 trees identified as possible candidates for removal and replacement just in following through the assessment. Here are some of the conditions that, these are just a few of the conditions that we're mostly concerned about. The extent of the heaving of your sidewalks, the damage to the curbs, how shallow the roots are at this stage. You can see that your sidewalks have been painted to alert people to where there are tripping hazards or obstacles that would not meet ADA compliance today. So this is just a few of those examples. They're fairly typical. We didn't pick out just the photos that were the worst ones. These are not necessarily these aren't your sidewalks, but these are conditions that we want to avoid. And you can see that over time, the older the trees get, with obviously certain species are going to continue to lift sidewalks. So what's the issue? Let me back up before I move to that next one. The primary concern that we have at this time, primary concern is if we felt, and this is a big if we were able to maintain your trees and save them and we don't damage or destroy them through demolition or through the construction period, investing in all new sidewalks around those existing trees with that shallow root system that's there today is that invariably in the future, and I'll be honest, I can't predict that it's going to be 1 year, 3 years, or when, but at some point, we feel that those sidewalks are going to continue to heave and break, and now they're brand new sidewalks that might have to be painted yellow. That's the main condition that we're concerned about. And physically, simply making our ADA cross slopes and making all of your downtown sidewalks ADA compliant. So let's take a look at the images up there. On the left, this shows on the north side where the existing trees are located today, and where I commented earlier about now they become almost centered in that new widened sidewalk. The north side, as you know, also has to accommodate a bike lane. That's a requirement of WashDOT along with this project. So there's a lot going on now, and the trees, as you can tell, pretty much in the center. If the trees are removed, which helps with, not helps with, it would ensure that we're not breaking up new concrete with the existing roots, but if they're moved, we would propose that they move more towards the curb line. Now, on the north side, the image that shows on the right, they're out close to the curb line. The bike lane is inward of them. And there's more sidewalk for the activities that we talked about through the concept plan and the storybook and things like that, whether it's seating, outdoor dining, other activities. So that would be an example. And if I move to the next shot, let me back up and explain. Going in a new tree as a replacement would be in roughly that 3-inch caliper at the trunk. That's usually that 3-inch caliper is taken right about at breast height. That illustration is what is representing that newly planted tree. And then within about a 5-year period, you can start to see where they start to increase in size. The one thing on this image is that what I think is very important is now those trees move slightly southward on that north side. The shade pattern that they're casting is now benefiting people on the sidewalk. The height of your trees today are so high that there's no real sidewalk benefit for the shade. There is some benefit to the facade of the buildings in cooling the buildings, but from a sidewalk activity standpoint, trees moved further out would provide more shade. So that trees on the north side as new trees move further out. Let's talk about trees a little bit on the south side. Now, the shade issue on the south side is also not necessarily a huge concern for existing trees providing shade for your sidewalks. Primarily, that shade is being provided by your buildings, since you have an east-west oriented Main Street. The one on the left shows the existing trees on the south side. There aren't necessarily as many in this image that we've shown, but these are actual Pullman buildings that we've used. And then where would they be placed? Again, closer to the curb line with enlarged areas at their base that could also include some landscaping. That would be permanent landscaping in your downtown, and so you're not relying as much on individual pots and planters throughout the downtown. I should mention that all of the new trees would be automatically irrigated. So this shows the one on the right where the trees would also have that growth both, and you can see across to the other side, the trees have that growth as well. We wanted to show you these images from an eye level versus an aerial view because we think this is the view people see. So I'll do a quick summary. The storybook input that we received was, gosh, we love those trees. We think they add and create the character for Pullman. It gives it part of its identity, and we understood that. The technical challenges we feel are very much a challenge from the actual constructability of this project if the trees were to have to remain. I won't say it's an impossibility, but it would be a real challenge to do that. So as a result, we have talked to your staff, your city arborist, your urban forester, your parks department, and public works. Early on, this was a couple of weeks ago, and we say, in the case of any of the trees that might be damaged or have to be replaced, what would be a great replacement tree list? So we've exchanged that back and forth. We've come up with what we think could be some good trees for that. We've asked them what their opinion is with regard to this project and saving the trees. And their response to us was unanimously that they felt it would be best for your project if your existing trees were removed and we replaced them. We also talked to the steering committee last week. We gave them a very similar presentation to what you're seeing now. We explained those challenges of constructability, trying to maintain the trees, and what it does to the overall project, and potentially damaging the sidewalks in the future. Their recommendation unanimously was to remove the trees and replace them. And in terms of our professional opinion as your design team, we will also give you that recommendation, is that is what we feel needs to be done for your project. Can I answer any questions or return to any images?
Okay. We'll go to Becky first.
Yes, Adele, first of all, just a personal note, I want to say that you've instilled so much confidence in this community that I've spent many, many hours talking to people about trees, more than I ever thought I would. And every one of them, whether they agree with what you're suggesting or not, has talked about their confidence in you personally and then in Welchco more generally. And so I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm curious, we got an email this morning about sustainable stormwater systems. Are you thinking of those as you move on with this project of putting in those kinds of green stormwater systems?
Rain gardens, things where we can collect and pre-treat the storm before it gets put into the river, things like that? Well, the answer is yes. I don't think we've fully refined that design, but one of the advantages of reshaping the bulbs at the corners is that we're gaining more space for landscape opportunities, and we're going to be looking at the opportunities to direct some of the stormwater to a rain garden where there's some pre-treatment before it would go straight into whatever drainage outlet it might be, like over at the Pine Street Plaza, et cetera.
Great. So given that, is there any way we could, those shallow roots that you're talking about, would those benefit from these stormwater systems? Would that be a way to adjust those concerns? Am I making sense? I kind of don't know what I'm talking about, but if you know what I mean, like could we keep some of the trees and those shallow roots would not be as much of a problem if we put in some of the things we were just talking about?
Well, if I understand your question, are you suggesting that we can keep some of the existing trees and create some sort of a rain garden surrounding it.
Yes, I'm asking if that's possible.
I don't believe that would be possible. Again, because of all of the grading issues that we will have to address, from thresholds at building facades to curb lines. We can adjust everything except where the tree is planted. If we were to attempt something like that, we would more than likely have to build either a well around a tree that might be at a location that's too low, or a planter with a retaining wall that surrounds a tree that happens to be too high. Now, those walls may only be in that 8-10-inch height, but you're adding a significant amount of construction activity around that existing root system, additional cost to the well or the retaining wall associated with it.
Thank you.
And then if it were to be a rain garden, one of the ideas there is that you collect the water, it drains down, but if there's ever an overflow, you need to have an overflow. So we would be putting piping into the roots of that area of the tree as well.
Got it. Thank you. I love that there is no question we can ask that you have not thought about already, and I really appreciate that. And I'd just like to say, I am along with probably everyone else, have spent many, many hours talking about trees. I've talked to people who want to save the trees no matter what, regardless of the cost, regardless if a year later we had to redo the sidewalks, they don't care, they want to save the trees. And I've talked to people who are frustrated with council for spending so much time talking about trees and potentially risking the project. And I've talked to other people who just don't understand what the big deal is at all, one way or the other. And through all of those conversations, what I understand is that there are going to be a certain segment who is not happy. And I would like to say that we have listened very closely to people, and those people who feel so passionately, I appreciate them and would encourage them to come volunteer with the city. We have a sustainability commission that's coming up, and their knowledge and passion and input could be very well put to use. I'm sorry that there are going to be some very unhappy people, but I very much appreciate the expertise that you've brought to us. Thank you.
Pat.
I'd like to echo what my fellow council member just said, and I think we have all dealt with different varying opinions about the trees. I appreciate the fact that you have been very sensitive about how to deal with this issue, as emotional as it is. And I think what was very impactful for me was the meeting a few weeks ago where Becky illustrated the accessibility aspects of what these trees can do. And that was my aha moment, that what is it that we want? We want a vibrant, populated downtown. And if you exclude a whole segment of your population, that isn't going to accomplish what we want to do. And I feel really strongly about, throwing good money after bad, and that, the definition of insanity being if you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, that's good money after bad. Yeah. And as the, root system continues to develop, that's what's going to continue to happen. And I think that you have really given us a fair assessment of what can be done, and the decision is now ours, but you certainly have given us good material to work with. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate your patience with us and the project as well. Thank you.
Okay, Ann?
Thank you. So in relation to what both council members just talked about, excuse me, looking ahead, whether we keep the current trees or not, and specifically if we have newer trees, I see that the opening is bigger for those trees, but my question, and I brought this up before, is there some way to do a longer sort of permeable strip so that they aren't confined, so that in 5 or 10 years, the roots don't start raising up again, so that they go downward. Does that make sense? And also to Councilmember Wright's point, if we did keep some trees and we made that opening bigger, would the roots stay there if they got more oxygen and water, or would they start to, I mean, I know that the existing ones would stay, but would it cause the roots to go downward instead of try to come up for air and water in both scenarios?
My opinion would be, and because it would, that's a tough question to answer a yes or no to.
Okay.
But my opinion would be is that at this point, it's going to be an extreme challenge to force those roots now to go deeper. With regard to your question about whether or not we could have wider strips, larger strips, yes, you could do that. We still are back to the situation that we were talking about just a minute ago about we can't move the base of that tree, but sidewalks and curbs will be moving up and down. So at some point, you have to do some sort of a containment around those trees.
That makes sense.
What our thoughts are with regard to a new tree is that they will have at a minimum a 6 by 8 area around that new tree planting. The well that the tree is planted in, or the hole, would be at least that size. Unfortunately, we have not been able to access any records that show us how the existing trees were planted and what size the well was that accommodated those trees. I'm suspecting it was quite a bit smaller than what we would propose today for the new trees, only because some of the images that I showed you show the trees' roots actually spiraling around the opening, which suggests that it's quite small. That tree in particular may have some real issues in the future because they tend to choke themselves as they spiral.
Well, thank you. The dimension is helpful. It was hard to tell in the photograph what that actual scale was. So 6 by 8 makes me feel better.
in the imagery that we were showing you, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
And the idea there was that we're not necessarily proposing that it absolutely has to be an open situation where you can put greenery and shrubbery in that area. We think it's an opportunity to add permanent greenery to your downtown. There are options for more of a graded system that you could then have people walk over. There wouldn't necessarily be that barrier. Combination of both. As we get into more detail, we would probably explore that.
Thank you.
Okay, Megan, you're next.
Okay, thank you. So as a member of the downtown or Project Downtown Steering Committee, I have talked to numerous people about the tree issue, as Becky and Pat have also stated, but I've written down some thoughts, and I feel like as a member, I feel obligated to just, if you indulge me, I wanted to just say what I wanted to say. I deeply understand that trees provide cover and aesthetics to our downtown, but I also understand we want Project Downtown to be successful and enduring. It would be financially irresponsible to spend close to $9 million on the downtown project and have the new sidewalks heave up again in the next 5 to 10 years. We'd be back to the same conditions we have now with cracked and heaving sidewalks, which are a safety hazard. These types of trees do not work in an urban environment. Their roots are spreading out, pushing the sidewalk up because they're starving for water and air. The trees were supposed to be stunted, but my understanding is that didn't happen. The cost of protecting these trees is costly and the risk of damage is high. And so therefore, the recommendation by the steering committee is to replace them with trees with root systems that go deeper and that are fairly mature, and you've talked about those today. So just wanted to express my thinking on that.
Thank you, Megan. Eileen?
I just wanted to thank Dell for all the time that he has spent with me personally talking about this, so I have good information to talk to other people. And everybody's been real patient and sat through my slideshow, and my photos are even more dramatic than the ones that Dell has. And if you're curious about the tree that is strangling itself, I have the picture right here on my computer. If you'd like to see it, I'd be happy to show it to you. This has been tough. This has been tough on everybody. And you know, I'm hoping that we have enough of a satisfaction level within the community that we can move this forward in an amicable way. Thank you.
Nathan, do you have a comment?
Made sure to keep it at the end because I know, you know.
Well, you've been going first, so I've been trying to make sure all council members respond.
I'm keeping myself to the end, so you can keep me at the end. All right. So I'm going to totally be different than my council members. That's okay. I've been opposite on a lot of different things. I appreciate what Megan has said, what has already been said by everyone. We're elected here to represent, you know, the comments and the feedback that we receive from citizens. I've also talked to one or two citizens that say, rip them all out. Why keep them? You know. But the overwhelming amount of people who have talked to me have said they would like as many as can be saved to be saved. You had given several options last time, which I don't see on there now, about what I think save 92% of the trees, save 60%. I don't see that, so I'm guessing that is no longer an option that you're looking at.
I actually have those slides if you'd like to
Super.
look at them.
Awesome. I appreciate that. You know, during my master's degree, we looked at this for community design and bioregional planning. And we looked at New York City and how they deal with their tree problem because, of course, they've grown huge, had the trees there. And they, by and large, try to use rebar and wire meshing in order to, you know, keep those sidewalks down and keep their trees as well. Is that something that has been considered?
If you're asking if it's being, if it would be considered in a solution to keep the trees and to protect against cracking and heaving, et cetera, we put reinforcement in our concrete slabs in a number of different situations. My opinion would be is even if you reinforced your concrete, your new concrete, and kept your trees, that eventually those roots would still break that new sidewalk. What the rebar does is it will keep the sidewalk panels from separating most of the time, but it will not necessarily, what happens is it tends to lift all in one piece. At some point, there's a break, and normally in this case, it happens at the curb area or a change in material, and then it's tough to run that reinforcement from one material into another, say from asphalt to concrete, or from pavers to concrete, things like that. The tree root situation that you have today would still lift a reinforced slab. But it would not be out of the question to consider it even with your new trees, that in the areas directly around where they may be planted, a good idea might be to look to reinforce a new situation of a new tree and new concrete work.
Okay, yeah, because that's from what the research, that's a way to deal with this example of the lifting. So were you also able to look at, we received an email from, and Becky, I think she said she was going to meet with you, Monique, regarding the grading system for tree wells.
Yes, that email was forwarded to me. as well as to the design team, and I did look at that link. That one company provides a number of grading systems that go over the top of trees. In fact, they have, if I understood their website correctly, they actually have a precast concrete vault that is placed to accept a new tree, and then the grading goes over the top of it. That precast vault essentially becomes the well that contains the tree roots and things that happen. But yes, I did look at that link, and it was one of the comments I made about considering grading over the trees. In my opinion, looking at that website, you could not utilize that system with the existing trees, but it could be utilized with new trees.
Okay. I think the only other thing I'll bring up is that if the council agrees to do this, to take all of them out, which I'm not comfortable taking all of them out. I would at least like to be able to keep some of the ones that you may feel are better situated. But what Councilmember Wright said is very accurate, and I completely agree with her, throwing money after money. We've both been on just about the same time, and so that's understandable. Trees being removed, there was a topic that came up at one of the town halls of tree banking. And so being able to move forward, if that is something that can be fast forwarded. Mike, I know we've talked about this a little bit, about a tree bank. And I think you had said through Metropolitan Parks dollars, is that correct?
Yes, we'd be able to set up a separate bars numbers very quickly for those people that wanted to make donations towards that type of a thing. It wouldn't take very long at all. We'd be happy to write a letter for their tax purposes as well.
Okay. So I think the last thing also is, maybe my memory is failing me on this one, but we did have fruit trees downtown that were just a mess that we removed. Isn't that correct? So this has been done before. And we have survived. Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have survived. So I think the option one, of course, is not viable. Option two was what? Mid-level?
I was looking at a mid-level where we would essentially keep 38 trees if possible and remove 38. Councilman, I should tell you, and maybe invite Matt if you have any thing you'd like to add with regard to the true constructability issues. Right.
Thanks, Dell. There are, from the photos, you saw the yellow paint and this and that. So the ADA requires a 2% cross slope. So that's really flat, almost like this floor. So wherever we see the sidewalk heaved, that's already beyond a standard, right? It's out of standard immediately. And so if we leave that tree in place and we go put sidewalk on top of the roots, we're not in compliance. It's impossible to achieve compliance in many, many of those locations. And so even if the decision was to keep the trees, there are some federal standards that we have to abide by that we'd be in conflict with if we, in many of these locations. How many exactly, I can't say for sure, but it's many. I don't know if that answered your question.
So moving forward with not removing any would be not allowed, is what you're saying?
I think there are multiple locations where we would be forced to remove a tree in order to achieve the compliance.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification, I think, over, the heaving and everything like that, because that puts a liability,
Yes.
on the city. Okay. All right.
Okay. Ann, yes, please. And we move
May
this
I
on.
just ask a question about because I think last time you brought this up to us, the current trees, in the condition that they are, what is their expected lifespan that's left? What, can you speak to the health of the existing trees? And if we kept them, or some of them even, I seem to remember, and Rebecca, I think you said you had been talking to somebody and said, well, we had learned that if we keep the trees, it's actually not good for those trees because they're not going to survive a lot longer. Is that, I mean?
I hope I didn't
Or
say
something like
that. I
that?
think,
Sorry. I may be remembering that wrong.
I think your trees, based on the assessment that we did, are generally doing okay. But the damage and the havoc they're creating around them is
Right.
something that it will make new sidewalks really tough to ensure that they don't get damaged. The trees that are in place now, I mean, those could, if you allow them to continue to do that, they could probably live for another 20 years, 25, 30 years. I mean,
okay.
but they are in a situation where they no longer have any irrigation. I'm not sure they ever had irrigation. Again, we can't find the design drawings for them. There is no irrigation to them. In some cases, those image shows their roots are encircling their
Right.
own root ball. How long the trees could live if we were able to save them, it's a guesstimate, but
Okay.
I would say, I mean, they're not just going to die right away. They're in relatively good shape for the situations they're planted in.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
I think we've heard from I've heard from all the council members here on the status, and I think there's some direction, at least that I'm hearing. Megan had very clearly put out that you've wrestled with that, and some others have as well. And I'm basically saying I think I've heard tonight from the majority to go ahead and make sure that we are not throwing money after bad. We want to make sure that these sidewalks are going to be good, and they're going to be ADA compliant, and that means we'll plant new trees. That's what I'm sort of hearing. And I'm getting the nods from that, from the majority.
I just want to make sure I'm in the minority.
Okay. So basically, the majority say, let's go ahead and do it. And we acknowledge the fact that, yes, there are importance in trees, and we know that. But we also want to make sure that we have our sidewalks and we take care of our ADA compliance. I mean, all you have to do is travel through Europe and the Middle East and you find out what it's like not to have handicap parking and all that, and you really appreciate the fact that we have these laws. So.
Thank you. I'd just like to add one thing, that as we've looked at the potential for the trees coming out, where new trees might be located, that the project will end up with more trees in your downtown than you have today because of the opportunities at bulbs and in replacing the tree locations that are there today. So.
And we will have solid irrigation, and we will have GIS to say what we have done, so in years future, they can say, yes, you did it the right way.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next item under discussion tonight is the quick report on the budget calendar and discussion. So Mike Urban, we go back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Council, I'm looking at the budget schedule that was previously approved, and there's not many days left. So earlier tonight, we had the public hearing on the budget, and it's the goal of staff to be able to bring you, stay on the schedule that was previously set, unless there's a reason to divert, but we wanted to just give Council a chance to discuss the budget and the presentations over the last several weeks to see if there's any changes that should be made to the mayor's proposed budget, or if we should bring you a clean budget ordinance at the next meeting based on what's been presented so far. So as we did last time when I presented the budget, I wanted to give the council that opportunity to discuss amongst yourselves and listen in.
I just have a quick question, Mike, and that is in regard to the Civic Improvement Fund, where we have actually allocated no monies for tourism services. With that still being unsettled, do we have the ability to amend the proposed budget on the 29th? Or would it serve us better to fully, to do everything on December 13th, skipping the November 29th timeframe?
My recommendation to council would be, we can always bring a budget amendment back on December 13th with the rest of the budget amendments, or in January when that's resolved. The small group is meeting on Thursday to go over the RFP as it was presented. Jen's left, but Jen's done a lot of research on that and has some fact-finding we'd like to present before going forward. So that's, that would be my recommendation, but if council wishes to postpone, we can certainly do that. We just need to adopt this budget by the end of the year.
I just wanted to make sure that we had some margin there to work with, and that we could do amendments past the 29th, because I suspect that we probably will need to do that.
So we can bring the budget here on the 29th and amend later on that particular item. Just want to make sure it's clear.
Right, and that's very similar to what we did last time as well, because we were in this exact same position with the tourism contract in 2020, where we put that on hold, and how was that going to look? And we did 2 6-month contracts and then another 1-year contract.
Okay.
Becky?
Thank you.
I don't really have a question, but I do want to extend my thank you to the city manager. As I look at this schedule, that we are on time. It's really kind of astounding. I know it's late, and probably everyone is like me, and I would like to go home, but I'm reminded at this moment, too, of how many late nights you must have put in to keep us on track, considering we do not have a finance director nor an HR director. And doing all of this work without those 2 positions there is really astounding to me, and keeping us on track. And yet at the same time, you were doing searches for those positions, which is even more additional work. And so I don't have a question about the budget. It's been really thorough. It's been an educational experience for me. I thank you for that. And I thank you, and also, Mike, I thank your family for allowing you to be here and give us this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, very much so.
Thank you.
So we go ahead with the 29th. Very good. So you've got that?
Okay, I will bring back as presented. There can certainly be more discussion on the 29th, of course, and I'll update the council on how the meeting on Thursday goes and those discussions as well.
Any new business to come before the council tonight? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?